So, a couple of days ago, I was on my morning japa meditation walk, and we got a nice little lake down near our place, and as I was walking around, I saw the sunrise beginning, and it was like really, wow, really nice. So I paused for a moment reflecting on that, because there's some wonderful spiritual teachings that also speak about the rising sun as a metaphor. And I took a picture and walked just a little further on and was in actually a better location and went to take a picture again. And by this time, not even 10 minutes later, it was all over. In fact, about 5 minutes. And it was sort of caused me to laugh a little to myself. And I instantly remembered this song by George Harrison. Sunrise doesn't last all morning. A cloudburst doesn't last all day. It's from a song with the refrain, and the title is All Things Must Pass. All things will surely pass away. And that's actually a very wonderful spiritual awareness. At the time that he wrote that song, he was being very much influenced by one of my spiritual teachers. So I kind of knew where he was sort of coming from in writing this. And it speaks to some really important spiritual truths. We find that in life, nothing lasts. In times of tremendous difficulty, and we will all at different times experience great difficulty in our lives, it's really important to be conscious and aware that even this shall pass. The worst of times will not last forever, that they too shall pass. And this ability to be able to step back a little from my mind is really an important spiritual exercise. When we have no training, or we're not deeply thoughtful, we are more likely to be swept away by whatever is going on in our mind. And unlike the movie title, the mind is not a beautiful thing, not at least in the yoga philosophy. The mind, in fact, is considered, if it is unbridled, unrestrained, or uncontrolled, undirected, to be the greatest enemy. The greatest enemy of who? The greatest enemy of yourself, your true self, the spiritual being who is temporarily residing within this body. We become so overwhelmed by our mind and by these misconceptions that the body that I have on is me. And I totally identify with it. I am a man, or I am a woman, I am a Kiwi, I am Asian, I am an American, I am a Russian, whatever. And it's just absolutely not true. That's not who you are. You are not your body or not your mind. These are coverings that cover you up. But when we do not learn to exercise any control of the mind will always victimize us and lead us into tragic places. And we will experience deep sadness. Being able to, as they say, hit the pause button in moments of great chaos in our life or great sadness or great difficulty, and to be able to step back and to have this awareness that this will pass. Don't lose the plot. Don't get overwhelmed by this. This is a really important early step in leading a more spiritual life. But there's also another side to it. Just like in this song, sunrise doesn't last all morning. I mean, that's the positive thing. A cloudburst doesn't last all day. Yeah, I get that. But why should we consider that the happiness that you will experience in this life in different ways will also end? Sunrise doesn't last all morning. Even the good times will come to an end. And then new good times may start a little further down the road, and they too will come to an end. So there are two kind of like really important spiritual principles to appreciate when we consider this, or we consider this subject. One is just what we spoke about. The second one is probably actually more important. And it deals with the reality that why don't the good times last? And I want them to. I plan, I arrange, I try to control my life in such a way that the good times are going to last. Well, you know what? The bad news is they ain't. They're not going to last. So why is it? Why don't we learn? Why don't we learn? Why don't we learn that everything that has a beginning will also have an end? There is no living happily ever after, like in the children's stories or the love novels where they fell into each other's arms and the music played and they were in love forever. This is fantasy. This is not the reality of things in this world. And if we don't get a grip on this, then we will not seek, we will not look for what is in our real best interest. What we're doing is we are always seeking that which is eternal in a world that is temporary, in a life, in this body that is temporary. But we desire that which is eternal, don't we? Right? We desire things to last forever. I mean, the big shock, of course, is the death of this body. When somebody's body dies, we go into shock if they are close to us. Even if it's a pet, we cry, we grieve, we lament, and wish it was different. But it's not. And it will never be different, because this is the nature of this world. It is the nature of life in this world. We, on the other hand, we are eternal beings. This is why death freaks us out so much. Death freaks us out. We're just getting near a dead body, sort of, everybody spazzes out and they feel freaked out, to encounter a car accident. I saw one time, when I was living in the Philippines, this car that had, not a car, they call them jeepneys, kind of open sides on them and stuff, and this thing had just like slid out of control and started just tumbling down the road. And then I had gone past and stopped and jumped out and ran and looked around first, and there was an old man, about 70, near me, and he looked okay, completely dazed, but he looked like he was all right. Then I looked, there was a woman lying on the road. And then as I looked at her, she looked around and then let out this scream and started beating on the road. And I instantly knew there's going to be a child here in trouble. And I ran over to the vehicle and I screamed at these guys because they're all in shock all over the road from this accident. And I asked them to come on, help me lift this vehicle. And I had to really get them going to do it. And then as we start lifting it, you see two little feet underneath. There's this child that had been crushed. And it's like really distressful. It's really frightening. It's really a freak out for people. But this is the nature of things in this world. And what is it that is really going to make a difference to our journey through this life, to the life that we live, and the time when it comes for us to leave this body, is to be able to cultivate this understanding of myself as being an eternal spiritual being, temporarily residing within this body. My deep desire for happiness, my deep desire for love, to love and to be loved, actually comes from my eternal spiritual nature. And this wonderful process of meditation, genuine spiritual meditation, is for the purpose of me being able to come to a full spiritual realization of who I actually am. And when that takes place, I become free from all fear. I don't become overly distressed by misfortune that occurs in relation to my body and relationships. And my natural desire for deep and eternal spiritual love becomes awakened. And one is able to now engage in the most wonderful spiritual experience. So all of this becomes possible if we engage in a genuine spiritual process. The most powerful process for bringing about this change, for awakening my true identity, for me having this deep realization, is in the form of this activity of mantra meditation, and more particularly for kirtan, this particularly what's called sankirtan, the congregational or group chanting together of these spiritual sounds. What is happening when I do this? My mind is actually being fully immersed or submerged in that which is transcendental. And it has a tremendous purifying effect. It clears away everything that is covering my heart of hearts. Everything that is covering my true spiritual identity gradually becomes washed away. And with that now comes spiritual realization of who I actually am as a person. This body is not a person. That's not your personhood, is not associated with this body. When somebody leaves that body, the body's no longer a person. Who you are as an actual spiritual being, a person, Purusha it is called, becomes known when one engages in this form of activity, when they hear about these spiritual subjects and take guidance from those that have true spiritual authority and vision. Then our life truly becomes transformed. So then just ordinary things in our life, like a sunrise, like a thunder and lightning and a sudden downpour of rain, all the things, good and bad, that we observe, the things that are beautiful, the things that are ugly, everything that we observe now becomes an impetus for this spiritual path that we are on. And we are able to see things in a different way. So really encourage you to try and build a personal practice. Here we're just kind of hanging out and chanting these wonderful spiritual sounds together. But what I would encourage you to do, that if you have an inclination, then you need to talk to the people, I think you know who's who more or less, or you can ask around, that are sort of running the program, and explore a little bit more deeply about what it is that you need to do, or practices that you can begin, the meditation practices and things that will actually begin to bring about this personal change in your own life. Okay? So, a little sunrise in the morning caused that one to happen. Yeah.
Charitas, people come back with the argument that, you know, if your expectations are too high and that
Yeah.
you didn't have bad times, then you wouldn't appreciate the good times. And if you don't expect too much, then
Yeah.
you won't be disappointed.
Well, got two different ideas there. One is the idea that variety is the spice of life. We need the bummers to make it so that the good times are really wow. And that's actually not very sound. Because even those good times will not last. And they have a limit. And we've used this example many times, the most beautiful piece of music that just thrills you and sends you into ecstasy. Okay, tie you to a chair, put the headphones on, listen to that same piece of music for the next 24 hours and see what it does to you. Well, 2 hours into it, you don't want to hear it anymore. And it's this strange reality that something that I find pleasurable, if I do it over and over and over and over, it becomes not just boring, but actually, they have a saying in Bhagavad Gita, that which in the beginning tastes like nectar and in the end becomes as bitter as poison, is a certain type of happiness, material happiness. That is the nature of things. So we're not running away from, don't worry. If something nice happens, cool, I can see it, it's good, it's all right. Something bummer happens, okay, I got a handle on that. This is really unfortunate. I'm not liking this at all. But this is not going to drive me and determine what I'm doing in life and what I'm running after. I mean, you spend your whole life running after that which has a beginning and therefore must have an end. And people do it because they do not know about a spiritual and eternal alternative. So let me just say, you know, these are not really high kind of ideals that are so difficult to achieve. No, I tell you, I grew up in a little tiny town south of here, and when I was about 19, I went to Australia, and then I went to India. I was just like, it was like do or die. I had to find out, what the hell is this all about? I wanted to find out. I was a complete idiot. I was totally drugged out of my mind. The first time I read one of these great spiritual texts, the Bhagavad Gita, I read it from cover to cover, and I put it down. It was like, what was that? I didn't even get one idea. Not one thing stood out to me like, wow. I was just like a complete space cadet, like big time. But any change that has occurred in my life is a testament to the great spiritual power of this process. It is the power of these mantras, these spiritual sounds, that brings about change and brings realization, a true awakening. And anyone, even a child, can participate and come to these experiences also. Okay? Sort of. So, you know, we're not really buying you need the bad stuff so the good stuff seems like it's better. You know, and that's not a very sound philosophy. People say it and they try to live it, but it's not very sound, and it's not very smart from a spiritual perspective. There is an alternative, there is an option. Okay? So we'll chant a little bit. I'll probably sing this Maha Mantra because it is particularly spiritually powerful, and ask you to join in.